So a big question people have been asking is the nuclear energy policy going to be any better under Trump? And a lot of the YouTubers who have been looking at this are thinking, oh, Trump's going to be horrible for this because he's all about the coal and the oil and everything. Well, I mean, he is, but that doesn't mean you can't be for nuclear too. And since he made Chris Wright his Secretary of Energy, and we'll get to him a little later because he's got some comments in this story too. But that was always an indication that he was pretty good behind nuclear. And so that's what this story is about. Just getting started, experts say Trump admin could fuel nuclear renaissance. And that's one of those things that so many of us have been waiting for. Let's start down here with what J.D. Foster, formerly of the Office of Management and Budget, said. Just laying down the truth here, in this country we've made it so difficult that it's almost impossible to build a nuclear power plant. The Nuclear Regulatory Agency is one of the slowest moving entities in the universe when it comes to assessing new technologies and nuclear power. He's just laying down the truth here. As I pointed out before, the NRC has never approved a new type of reactor in the entirety of its existence. All of the reactors it's approved is technology that already existed when it was formed. And yes, that includes those two new AP1000s, Vogtle 3 and 4 in Georgia. That's what, 40, 50-year-old technology? That's horrible. Imagine if medical science or computer systems or anything else had been paused back then, and there had been no progress at all in the last 40 years. So computers still work the way they did in the 80s, and we were all trying to do this on IBM XTs. Or whatever. No, we wouldn't have all of this. How many lives have been saved by medical advances in the last 40 years? That's the scope of this. Nuclear was just getting started. It was just getting going. And then the NRC cut it off at the knees. And that includes a long and stringent permitting process, a measly specialized workforce, nuclear waste management. Okay, so the workforce is a good point. Because it's been so long since anyone has built these, we've kind of forgotten how to do it. There aren't that many people left who know how to do it, and the ones that do are working at other power plants. So we got to get people educated. We got to get people knowing how to do this again so we can start making these again. Nuclear waste management, that is just, yeah, I've gone into this before. There really shouldn't be much in the way of nuclear waste. Really, you should just have the decay products that'll disappear in about 300 years. And that's very easy to shield from and everything. Federal regulations and public fear surrounding radiation. That's really it. It's all the anti-nuclear hysteria. And a lot of people don't know this. I don't know if I mentioned this before. The origin of all that hysteria was from Malthusians. It was from the overpopulation people. I remember these people growing up. Oh, the earth is going to be overpopulated, and by the year 2020, people will just have 1 square foot of land to stand on. And overpopulation was such a fear that they felt that nuclear power, being so powerful, having such great potential to improve all of our lives, might save the lives of so many people that the overpopulation would destroy the planet. That's where it comes from. All of like the astroturfing and everything else from the renewables people and from the fossil fuel industry and things like that, that all came later. Yeah, it was originally just the Malthusians. Although former presidents Joe Biden and Barack Obama pursued an expansion of nuclear technology for its effective and reliable energy output, the U.S. still remains primarily reliant on fossil fuels because renewables just don't cut it. That's what we've seen. Biden signed the ADVANCE Act, designed to bring down the cost of nuclear licensing, create new opportunities, and allocate additional resources to the NRC. Despite this, nearly all nuclear power currently produced in the U.S. comes from reactors built between 1967 and 1990. But Trump, who has a long track record of supporting nuclear energy development in his first term, has indicated that he is open to exploring avenues to expand the industry's innovation. Less than 1 month after returning to office, Trump established the National Energy Dominance Council and tasked its advisors with informing him on how to bring SMRs, we've talked about these before, online, and they usually run like 350 megawatts. They use 300,000 homes as just the scale of it, just how much you can power with one of those. And then it goes into DOE Secretary Chris Wright. He stepped down from this before, but he used to be on the board of Oklo before he was named Energy Secretary. And they do MMRs. Those are even smaller ones, like less than 100 megawatts. And they have ones as small as like 5 megawatts that would power, communities, business parks, hospitals, things like that, and be able to supply electricity for that and for the surrounding community. And in case there was a power loss, you can keep the hospital going and maybe some of the surrounding homes and businesses as well. They're cool things. Check them out. They're these little A-frame structures. They're so cool looking. You wouldn't think they were a nuclear power station at all. I just love that. I love that. So he said, the long-awaited American nuclear renaissance must launch during President Trump's administration. As global energy demand continues to grow, America must lead the commercialization of affordable and abundant nuclear energy. As such, the department will work diligently and creatively to enable the rapid deployment and export of next-generation nuclear technology. Nuclear is going to take hold, but it's not going to come tomorrow. I wish it was. Me too, and it's just, when you think about how long it takes to make a reactor, and we're talking like full-sized gigawatt-plus reactors. Units 2 and 3 at Onagawa, Japan, I've talked about this before, they took 3 years to build. From groundbreaking to criticality, it was like a little over 3 years. That was it. It was a different 3-year period for each, but yeah, that's how quickly they built them. And if you're wondering if they took safety shortcuts, the Onagawa plant was closer to the epicenter of the 2011 earthquake, got hit by a bigger earthquake, and got hit by a larger tidal wave. No disaster. You've never heard of the Onagawa disaster because there wasn't one. You heard of the Fukushima disaster because of just really, really bad design decisions and just insane orders that the plant people were getting from up top. I mean, there's a lot of videos about what happened with that. But yes, that's the potential. That's what we could do. So they quote the U.S. Energy Information Administration saying, this envisioned nuclear renaissance lags behind a huge permitting problem. The length of time needed to complete the permitting process varies, with the NRC application review process taking up to 5 years in some cases. And the sad part is, even after you're approved, they can still add delays along the way, and do. When you can cause so many delays and obstructions for the new AP1000s that Westinghouse goes bankrupt, then you got problems. Okay, some public affairs flunky for the NRC said, the NRC has improved its licensing efficiency over the last few years. The official pointed to the reduction in time needed to reach a licensing decision and a drastically streamlined application process that resulted in a nuclear reactor construction permit being issued within 18 months. That was not a power station. That was a test facility. That's not anything that's going to be putting power on the grid. So don't be fooled by their rhetoric. And they also said that they are ahead of schedule for the safety portion of our review for TerraPower's construction permit application. That's for the Natrium reactor in Wyoming that I've talked about. Except they're not. If you follow that link, they're basically saying, hey, TerraPower, we need a lot more information from you. And if we delay things further, it's your fault. That's what they're saying. They're not saying that it's going to happen faster. They're just saying they're going to be blaming TerraPower for the delays. That's all I really said. Man, you gotta know how to read government speak. Okay, so Foster said, we set an impossible goal. Strict nuclear power regulations, some of which require a 10,000-year waste management requirement when proper waste, if you're allowed to burn all the actinides, is gone in 300, not 10,000. Which means that a nuclear waste repository must keep radiation doses to people below a safe limit after the waste is buried for 10,000 years. And the real question is, what do you consider a safe limit? Because as we'll talk about a little further down, they're just not following the science on that. They point out that only 2 large reactors have been built in the last 20 years. That's Vogtle 3 and 4. But Foster says SMRs are the practical way forward in the nuclear realm, and that's a very good solution for this. You just mass produce them, take them to the site, drop them in. I mean, the AP1000s, the idea of those, and they're not dead, there are more of them being built elsewhere in the world, but the idea of them is that you don't have to just construct everything on site. You can't prefab the whole thing and ship them out like you can with an SMR, but you can prefab the parts, then you just go out and assemble it. So it's not as easy as doing an SMR, but it should be a lot easier than doing a traditional plant, which, again, can potentially be built in 3 years, as we saw in Onagawa. Okay, and then Tim Eccles, a commissioner in the Georgia Public Service Commission, and he was involved in bringing Vogtle Units 3 and 4 online. Many in the Trump administration tout nuclear as the answer. I have yet to see an incentive big enough to get us to build another AP1000. Yeah, tough to blame him. After all the crap the NRC put them through, and everything that happened in the interim. And he said to phase out fossil fuels, power data centers, and deploy electric transportation, SMRs are essential. SMRs can be built quicker and cheaper than big nuclear. That will allow states with smaller budgets to deploy advanced nuclear technology. And as we see with the idea of natrium, you can also drop them in place of existing coal plants. And that means you can use the existing boilers and turbines that the coal plants used. Those are still just fine. There was nothing wrong with them. It was just the burning coal part that we didn't like. So you take out the coal stuff, you drop in nuclear, and you just have nuclear providing the heat instead of burning coal. But you already have the turbines, you already have the infrastructure, the transformers and everything, and you just plug it in and go. All right, going down a bit further, you have Jack Spencer of the Heritage Foundation, and he said, for anyone who fears exposure or low-dose radiation, I'll say 2 things. The nuclear industry has a 70-year history of providing superior protection against radiation exposure. Fun fact, if you're an airline pilot, you'll get a lot more radiation exposure than a nuclear plant worker. Well, except for Chernobyl. We know why Chernobyl was such an exception. But yeah, it's something like an airline pilot, full-time doing regular flights at 35,000 feet, will get something like 5 millisieverts per year. And that's more than I think the plant workers usually max out at like 1.5 to 2. We have a long history of demonstrating that industry can protect us against low-dose radiation exposure, 1. 2, we should really follow the science on what the risk actually is. And the thing they do is not follow the science, because they're using a completely debunked and obsolete model called linear no threshold. So the idea is you're looking at radiation exposure, how much radiation exposure causes how much cancer and other problems. It's primarily cancer, so we'll just stick with cancer. The problem is when you're looking at lower doses of radiation and people getting cancer from a zillion other things, at some point it's going to get down to where the data is too noisy. So trying to figure out what happens in there with cancer rates at low exposures can be very tricky. What the linear no threshold model does is make an assumption that is not based on any science that that line as it goes down crosses the origin. And what that means is that any last little bit of additional radiation exposure that you get, according to this model, increases your cancer risk, including eating a banana and sleeping with your partner. And there just isn't any reason to accept that. So the actual science goes towards one of 2 models, generally accepted as the linear threshold model. And so what you're trying to do with that is find out where that 0 point is, the point below which you can have radiation exposure without any real increase in cancer rates. And so it's a question of where you set that, and a lot of scientists are saying that the EPA is really setting them too low and need to adjust it. But that's the idea. There's a threshold somewhere, and below that it just doesn't have any effect. The other model is hormesis, which means that below that level, it can actually start to have a little bit of a beneficial effect. There's no scientific consensus on that, but there's a growing body of literature that seems to support it. which would fit with everything else in the universe, because it seems that everything exists is good for us in low amounts, bad for us in high amounts, and it's just about what level that is for that particular substance, whatever you're talking about. Apparently it applies to radiation too. So we have Steve Malloy on the Trump EPA transition team. That was back in 2016. He said, "I'm hoping that EPA will redo the radiation risk models. People are so scared of nuclear power and radiation. We haven't seen any sickness. We have all this great technology that can't be deployed because of fear of nuclear radiation, where you're going to get far more radiation walking by the banana aisle at the store than you would if you lived near 3 Mile Island." They do have an ex-post from the U.S. Department of Energy for comments by Secretary Wright. There's a video attached to that. Let's just look at the video and see what he says.
It's been decades since we've built any meaningful nuclear capacity in this country. That's deeply unfortunate. But President Trump as well is committed to getting this nuclear renaissance that's been talked about for years, but actually getting it going. We have a project right now, the Palisades nuclear power plant in southwestern Michigan was shut down 2.5 years ago, just needlessly retired. That plant will be back online hopefully by the end of this year.
That's good because, that plant, I think it still had some time on its license left to like 2031 or something, because they got a renewal. They got a 20-year extension. So when they talk about the life of a nuclear power plant being 40 years, that's just the time of the license. Licenses can be extended and have been. In fact, some of them have extensions now going up to 80 years. And we'll see in a few years, I guess, if any of them can get an extension up to 100 years. But yeah, these things can just keep on trucking if you let them. And if you properly keep them maintained and everything.
And if not the end of this year, very early next year. So we're going to see some plant restarts. We're going to see increased investment. We will see a small modular reactor, hopefully running, and definitely several under construction during President Trump's term in office.
Excellent. The SMRs, he talked about running indefinitely. Obviously, they'll run out of fuel at some point. But what he's talking about is the fact that you don't need to do a refuel cycle every 2 years. You take it, you stick it in the ground, you cover it in concrete, and it just runs for however long it's meant to run for, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. At the end of that, you dig it back up, replace it with a new one. They take the old one back to the factory to be refurbished, and you got your new one in place. Put in 3 or 4 of them, and you got a full-size plant, pumping out over 1 gigawatt.
So nuclear is going to take hold, but it won't move at the speed of, for example, new natural gas plants. Those are
sadly true.
Those are growing like flowers right now. But nuclear is going to happen. It's going to come in the next few years, but it's not going to come tomorrow. I wish it was.
Yep. So that was Secretary Wright. And so getting back to the story, a spokesperson for the DOE pointed to Wright's first secretarial order, writing that it highlighted the need to streamline permitting, remove undue burdens on American energy, and modernize America's nuclear stockpile. Secretary Wright and the Energy Department is hard at work to ensure the American nuclear renaissance is just around the corner. Okay, yeah, that's more politispeak there. But he also said the Department of Energy has been working diligently to enable the rapid deployment and export of next-generation nuclear technology. Secretary Wright has eased the regulations and permitting rules to enable new construction products at the department's 17 national labs. The Energy Department has also reissued a $900 million solicitation supporting the deployment of SMRs to unleash American energy. Rest assured, we are just getting started. So I guess time will tell. But wouldn't it be great if we saw them start putting SMRs in the ground? If we actually saw Natrium get started in Wyoming and that new pebble bed reactor get started in Texas, and get them doing all the other things they need to do to get us a nice future of cheap, clean, reliable baseload energy. Hopefully in a little more decentralized fashion, so that you don't have these massive blackouts whenever a problem occurs. We'll see what happens. I'm really hoping for the best, because this can work. We know it can. We just need to do it. Thank you so very much for watching. Comments for the comment god, shares for the share throne. Please hit like, subscribe, and the bell, and of course, donate.bogosity.tv. Keep me doing what I do. You can do a one-time donation, or you can be a regular supporter, Patreon, Subscribe Star, Discord, get these videos early and ad-free. other benefits like AMAs and joining the monthly live stream. Thank you so very much for watching. Until next time, stay strong and be free.